Hello, lovely souls, and welcome to the Raw with Rach podcast, where we embark on a journey to discover the beauty of self-care, mindfulness, and the incredible stories behind the businesses within our yoga and natural skincare communities. I'm your host, Rachel Whitecross, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be your guide through these raw and unfiltered conversations. So today we have a dear friend, an all-round legend, bit of an enigma, hard to describe how to describe you, Britt. My dear friend Britt, who's joining us today to talk about essential oils as a natural part of counselling therapy. Um, we may get off topic. Look, listen, Britt, it's us.
It is us.
It's us. We've discussed for years adding in a segment called Talking Shit with Britt, where we just talk and solve all the world's problems. So this is the good stuff for that. Oh gosh. And as I mentioned earlier to you, Britt, I am nearly 30 weeks pregnant and I barely have a brain. So
I really respect it. I'm not pregnant, haven't been, and I feel like I don't have a brain either. So I can only imagine. I can only imagine.
oh gosh, I'm just like, yeah. I remember when I was pregnant with Violet being like quite sharp throughout the pregnancy, and then afterwards being like, whoa, what hit me? Whereas now I'm like, what? How do I conversation?
Yeah.
How do I conversation?
Yeah. Well, I did see something recently that said something to the effect of pregnant women's metabolism changes in a way that is similar to as if you were running a marathon every single day.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would love to have that body. I wish that came with the nature of pregnancy. I feel the tiredness of that for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it doesn't help when you have a toddler who's also not sleeping. So then you're like,
Yeah.
just don't get that catch up. But yeah, the female body is miraculous. And pregnancy is something like it should be appreciated. Like it's a triumph to get to the finish line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like you touched on the hormonal changes, just the physical impact, and how you navigate that as a person who's on the planet for possibly the first time, right?
Mm,
Like I'm I'm
mm,
I'm a baby. I'm new here. I don't know how to do
mm.
this. So
No, no.
understood.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, for those listening, strap in. That's where we're gonna go here. Oh gosh. So Britt, we start our podcast always with asking our guests what book or article you're reading or listening to, because I value audiobooks as a busy mum, and how it influences your self-care.
It's a great question. I kind of have two answers to this. Um, I I think my first initial answer, if I'm talking about my own self-care, is actually fiction books. Because I think for me, particularly working in the counseling space and mental health sector, um, I think it can be very easy for me to fall into that space or sometimes trap of needing everything to be self-development or improvement
Mm,
or working on myself or others in some type of way. So for me, what self-care looks like is actually taking a step back in something that will help me feel really present. And so fiction kind of is that for me, like it's that sort of escapism type of stuff. So and I read pretty widely. I like all different sorts of books, but I've just recently started The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is it's just like a fiction, like kind of fantasy-esque type book, um, which has been really fun so far. It's a bit of a light read. So that's actually for my own self-care. Like if I'm feeling like I'm needing something for me, that's actually where I tend to lean. Um, Otherwise, I am also reading a book at the moment called Decolonizing Therapy, which on that more like in my professional work kind of side, but also just as a concept, the idea of like how do we approach mental health and mental health care from a place that isn't as pathologizing and actually looks at people in a much more holistic um, and less kind of Eurocentric sort of way.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a great read.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So you got two on the burner. So you
Yeah.
got professional and personal. I
Yes.
like that. Yeah, I totally can relate to needing some fiction just to be like,
Mm.
yeah, not everything being self-development and that. And I kind of fall into that trap pretty easily myself. So
Mm.
totally relatable.
Mm.
I for the first time, I don't know, I feel like this past year I've had like multiple books on the go.
Yeah.
Um, I also listen to a lot of audiobooks because like otherwise I just just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. But I have recently finished, so I'm talking about books that I finished.
Love it.
It's called Birth After Cesarean, and I found it super empowering, but really fascinating because it looks at how like midwifery has been influenced by the patriarch.
Mm.
And yeah, it's really interesting. And like it makes complete sense because it looks at like how, we were
Mm.
always natural delivery, vaginal delivery, usually at home,
Mhm.
and supported to have it at home. And we've gone so far the other way that it's like to have any of those things, let alone like a home birth, you've got to really like fight and push for that. And I just found that really fascinating. And then there's a whole section at the back where it's all about women who have had VBAC, like successful VBAC stories. And one of the interesting things for me reading it was like how all of these women had a story of having to like fight for listening to their body, which I'm
Mm.
finding really interesting. And even in my own experience, because I'm hoping to have a VBAC.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, even in my own experience, like having to be like, no, let's wait, let's give the baby time. Baby
Mm.
will come when she's ready.
Mhm.
Like, listen to my body, let my body do what it's known what to do for millennia. Like,
Mm.
yeah. So that's
Yeah,
been really cool.
that's fascinating, isn't it? Because it's, and I'm certainly never in the bag of wanting to rip on the advances of medicine and Western medicine. I think it does incredible
Mm.
things, and there is absolutely a place for it. Um, but I find it really interesting what you touched on there about this idea of, listening to our bodies. I think in a lot of ways we've become really detached from our bodies. Um, and I think you're right. I think it comes from a patriarchal place. I think it comes from a capitalism place as well. I mean, not to get like
Mm.
too really political, but especially from the jump. But I I think we live in a world that really values our intellect and the capacity that we have for progress and development, which again, really wonderful thing. But I think sometimes we forget that we're just mammals,
No, yeah, for
right? And so
sure.
we, you know, I think we sometimes can go too far in the other direction and fail to notice the actual wisdom and knowledge and data that we get just from our own internal experience. That doesn't seem to
Yeah.
get the kind of weight that it needs to.
Absolutely. I mean, we're just like a smart animal, right? Like
Yeah.
we are part of nature.
Mm.
I feel like we like to think that we aren't,
Mm.
but we have cyclical like our bodies are cyclical, like the
Mm.
female menstruation cycle is a
Mm.
cycle, like
Yeah.
moon cycles. Like, yeah, we are part of nature, yet I don't know if it's like we pride ourselves or we've just separated and detached so much from it.
Mm.
And then if you are someone who's, acknowledging that or valuing nature or valuing your cycle or being in tune, like trusting your intuition, um, you're like a hippie
Yeah.
or you're labeled as something along those lines as opposed to it being like, yeah, sure, like, and I
Mm.
mean, this kind of community will, you're probably listening and being like, yeah, I've been called that or worse or some other name or so I'm sure that they can relate, but it's an interesting time, a transition
Mm.
moving through that in a medical sense, but like also knowing that I'm not going to put myself or my body, my baby at risk with anything,
No.
but give me a freaking chance.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Like, and I think that that's what it comes down to if I'm drilling it into something like critical thinking, right? In that critical thinking absolutely doesn't mean ignoring sciences or ignoring, the wisdoms that we get from others, but it also doesn't mean ignoring the wisdom of yourself, right?
Hmm.
That, you know, this will sit in a slightly different category, but sometimes for me with decision making, I apply just like a really simple 1, 2, 3, go, right? Like, as in, if I am trying to pick between, option A and option B, I'll just go 1, 2, 3, go. What's my choice? And
Hmm.
whatever comes to me initially, I'm like, okay, there's something about that that I want.
Yeah.
Um, and I might not know why that was the path that I went down, but maybe I don't necessarily need to know because I know that that's the path I want to go down,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? That I don't necessarily have to be able to articulate and justify my position for that position to be valid. And
But
so, yeah,
yeah, that articulation and justification's head, not heart.
exactly right. And again, of
Like,
course, there is place for that, right? If I'm sharing in a decision with you, maybe I need to do that, right?
mm,
But there are times I think where we aren't given the opportunity and from ourselves or from others to make those kinds of calls for ourselves or
mm,
listen to our bodies, whether that is physiologically or just emotionally,
mm,
right? What feels right for us.
yeah. Mm. Yeah, totally. Oh man, Britt, we could go on for this. We could
Good.
go down, we could go down a very profound rabbit hole of this, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, it ties in, I think, with, again, the physical experience and the emotional experience with what you do, right? Um,
Hmm.
whether it is, through your yoga teaching, whether it is through your essential oils, the products that you make, the message that you put forward to people, it is about really kind of stripping back a little bit and coming to almost what I would maybe term, I don't know if you'd use this language, but the source material, right? What is
Yeah.
underneath it all? What am I needing right now? And what will help me achieve that?
Yeah. Oh, look, my intention is always just to bring people home. And
Mm,
that's going to look different for everyone. And I know the term self-care gets thrown around, but like that is really what it's about, caring for yourself.
mm,
And it does look differently for everyone.
mhm,
And but it's just giving people that space
mm,
to tune into what they need.
yeah,
Because yeah, as you've already mentioned, we're so and this is a very generalized statement, but like as a society, we're so far from that. And
mm,
like slowing down and tuning in. And it's so comfortable. It's
absolutely.
uncomfortable and people don't like uncomfortable. We are creatures of comfortability and habit more so now than ever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm hoping that's what I always hope, that at least whether it's a sniff of an oil or a stretch or a breath connection, it's just coming back to home. What do I need? What
Yep.
is my body like? What am I saying? What is my body saying? What is my mind needing?
Mm,
All of that.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Britt.
That's okay.
So, Britt, I was super impressed when I learned that you were offering my products to your clients in the counselling space.
Mm,
And I'm eager to learn more about how you use essential oils in your counselling services and
mhm.
how your clients have responded to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I guess for context, I see a really broad range of people, lots of different stuff. So, um, I have, as you and I did together, historically worked in the youth space, but currently I see people 16 and up. Um, again, for a wild range of issues, grief and loss, chronic health issues, stuff with their identity, people in the LGBTQIA space, lots and lots and lots of different stuff. Um, but again, even pulling off the back of what we were just talking about, I feel like at the core of it, regardless of the events that somebody is dealing with in their lives, the shared experience that almost every one of my clients goes through is this place of, okay, I know this thing intellectually, but experientially, I'm not okay. Right. So, as an
Mm,
example, I might feel like I know that I believe that in health at any size, I might know that all bodies are beautiful, and as long as I'm capable and comfortable and energized, it doesn't matter what my body looks like. But then I might look in the mirror and have an emotional reaction to that, right? And it's like, it doesn't matter how much I'm intellectualizing this thing and how much I believe that thought process, something is still getting in the way for me. And I find for people, particularly if they've gone through trauma, but it kind of happens across the board, that when we've experienced things that have caused really intense emotions that we haven't been able to reconcile, it does something to our bodies, right? In that we almost code into our nervous system a reaction that is subconscious. And so in my work, I've done a bit of reading on this concept called Polyvagal Theory. I don't know if you've heard it or know much about it, but for any of the listeners that don't know, if I'm really kind of stripping it back into simplicities, the idea is that our nervous system controls a lot of our emotional experiences, and the sort of 3 states that you can be in. One is, when your parasympathetic nervous system, which is what calms you down, right? When you are more elevated or activated, when that is in play, you're calm, you're socially engaged, things are in attunement, right? You feel connected, you feel present, things are great. When your body then senses a threat, again, might be conscious, there might be a presentation you have to do that's making you anxious, or there might just be somebody around you that you're not comfortable with, but you haven't clocked that that's what's happening yet, right? So your nervous system, your body and your senses will pick something up and it'll start to activate. And it will either mobilize or immobilize, depending on how intense this threat is, right? Mobilizing is your fight and flight, which we've all probably heard of, where, our heart rate will start increasing, we might start to feel a bit sick, get the sweats, get the shakes, all of that, where our body is starting to go into that stage of fight and flight. And what's actually happening there is our brain is telling our body, okay, there's a threat. My senses have told me there's a threat. We need to get ready to fight our way out of this or run, right? So biologically, that's what our body is doing. If that doesn't get resolved, and often those things don't in today's day and age, right? So say the threat is, I'm worried my marriage will break down, right? I might run and I might fight, but that's a much more complex threat, that it's not just a matter of me getting away to safety in every instance, right? That in that there might be a lot more to it, and I might not actually be able to fight and flight my way out of it. And so what happens then is, if I can't fight or flight my way out of it, instead of mobilizing, I start to immobilize, which is when I start shutting down. It's basically my brain's way of saying, okay, I haven't been able to fight and flight my way out of this. I cannot get out of this threat. So I am hunkering down. I am going in orbit so that I'm not impacted by this situation, right? I say all of that to say, in a lot of therapy approaches these days, I think we focus on that intellectualizing of like, how do I, change the way that I'm thinking? How do I, introduce new perspectives, or, even things like, using phrases and stuff, talking to yourself to try and energize yourself up to believe certain new perspectives. And again, this isn't to dog on that at all. That is really, really valuable. The only issue with that, though, is that tends to work better at the real beginning of that mobilization point, right? When you first start perceiving the threat, before your body has started reacting, if you can catch it then, using that part of your brain to calm down your body, which is what we call top down, right? It's your brain telling your body to calm down. If we can catch it, then that can work really, really well. But if I'm in a full-blown panic attack, me telling myself, oh, you're safe, the horse has left the station then, right?
Yeah.
So what we need to do instead in those moments is what we call bottom up, which is use my body, use my senses to tell my brain I'm safe. There's two reasons for that. One is that part of our brain that does the cognitive reasoning or the thinking our way through a situation actually kind of goes offline when we're in that re-escalated state, right? There's less blood flow to it. There's less neural activity in it because it's the newest part of our brain. And this reaction is coming from the oldest part of our brain.
The reptilian brain.
Exactly, right? So it does all of our basic functioning. It's what keeps our heartbeat. It's what keeps our lungs moving. It needs to overpower everything else to keep us alive. So that's why it doesn't tend to work when we're in that really escalated place. But if we're using our senses to calm our brain, what that does is it tells that old part of the brain that I couldn't do these things. This wouldn't be happening if I was unsafe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So to come all the way back to your core question, about like, what does it look like using things like essential oils in my therapy practice, is it's coming back down to the basics of what will bring someone back into that socially connected, calm, parasympathetic state.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of different ways that can happen for people, in that sometimes people need stuff that is really grounding, and sometimes people need something that is really elevating, right? And that's the mobilization, immobilization. So if I'm mobilized, as in I'm in the fight and flight, I need something that's going to bring me back to earth, something that's going to ground me and really calm that anxious reaction. If I'm immobilized, I actually might need something a bit more engaging, right?
Yeah.
So an example that I use for a lot of people if they're immobilized, so they might be in a real shutdown, they might be dissociating, they might be just like really flat and hard to sort of connect with, that something like a sour lolly, right? Like a warhead, right? I keep a bunch of them in my office because it's very hard to not be in your body when you're sucking on something sour, right?
Yeah.
So it brings a person back into their body, right? But on the flip side, again, if someone's in that more anxious state or that fight, like there's a real rage going on, it's like, okay, how do we calm that down? And that's where the oils come in, right? Because for a lot of people, the sense of smell is so powerful. It engages your memory, which goes offline again in this process sometimes, which is why when people have trauma reactions, their memory can be really kind of muddled because there's so much going on that feels critical. Your brain doesn't know what to keep and what to trash, right? So whereas smell is really, it's that part of your brain is right next to your memory center. And so that can be really good at re-engaging somebody. So having things like essential oils from an aromatherapy point of view is really useful for a person in a state like that. So I'll sometimes in session, if I see someone's actually escalating, the conversation is kind of over because I can't talk them out of that situation.
Yeah.
And so I will use those kind of tools to just reground them again. And I've also, as you know, I've ordered a bunch of your roll-ons at different points. I'll actually give them to clients because if they find that useful, then they can put that in their wallet, take it away, and use it in their life when they need it. I had a client once who I just adore. I love her so much. And she would, whenever she was between sessions having a bit of a hard time, she would get out her oil. She bought the same brand of tea that we have in my office, and she'd make herself a tea, have her oil, and she'd have her journal, and she'd pretend like she was talking to me, right?
Oh.
I just love her. But like something
Yeah.
like that even, right? And that's more of an intentional practice. But that for her felt very grounding when she was starting to feel like things were getting too hard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like, Britt, what you're describing is your gift, like you're giving people the additional tools. So yes, you've got your talk therapy, which counselling essentially is, but you're giving them a physical tool to work with. And so when we're talking about essential oils and, we're talking about the sense of smell, we're also activating our breath, which can be shut down when we're in those states, whether it's even that feeling of like clenching, holding tension, short breaths. If you're having a panic attack, it can be that rapid breathing. So by having the essential oils, you're taking a deep breath, let's slow it down, we're grounding. So you kind of you're teaching multiple skills and strategies. And for some people, like if you're gifting them the oil, it can also even just be the reminder of it. Like, I've got here, like I've got Calm the Farm here. So, like this sits on my desk where I work, and often, sometimes I don't even have to smell it because I just look at it and I'm like, Calm the Farm.
Absolutely, right? Because even that, right,
Yeah.
that's a sensory tool, right? It's like a reminder that I've got a resource here that I can use.
Yeah.
And even that, right, like when I was saying that, the more cognitive exercises work really well in those early stages, I will sometimes with people, if they're needing, much more of that, like they're needing some immediate resources to help them regulate their emotions so that they can get to the stuff that's sprouting from, that I'll sometimes do things like I'll have someone, like, so say the emotion is anxiety, right? Just for the purpose of conversation. And I'll get them to create a scale of 1 to 10. If 1 is like, I'm chill, I'm relaxed, I'm in that social engagement stage, and 10 is like, I'm in a full-blown panic attack that, rapid heartbeat, quick breathing, all of that, right? And I go, okay, what's going on for you at those different stages? So what does it feel like for you to be a 4 out of 10 as opposed to a 7 out of 10? And also, how would I know as an outsider that you're at different points, right? So
Yeah.
what is it like for you, and how are you presenting in your environment? And then I'll have them go, okay, what works when, right? So yeah, so a deep breathing exercise, so square breathing, where you're breathing in and holding and out and holding for the same amount of time, for example, right? That might work really well for someone. They might not need it at a 1 or 2, might work really well from a 3 to a 6, but it kind of stops working for them after that, right?
Yeah.
I sometimes have people almost map that out so that they know, one, I'm not going to waste my time doing something that doesn't work for me at this stage. Because I think sometimes that's the most disheartening thing for people, where they have a resource or a tool or a process that works, and then suddenly it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have a bit of a better idea of what works when. And then even just that, even knowing that you've got resources in place that will help you at those more intense ends of the spectrum, will often just be protective in itself.
Yeah.
Right? People will be comforted and calmed by knowing they've got something like that, and that they understand what's going on for them. Because again, part of the thing that gets away from us is that uncertainty. I don't know what's happening. It's out of control.
Yeah.
Right? So having just even something like that, right? To know that, okay, this is going to help me stay in control, or it's going to bring me a sense of control when things aren't in control, which is sometimes more important.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting. You reminded me, which I don't even think I've well, I mean, haven't publicly shared. I don't know if I've shared it with you, but there's a few of my oils, in the roll-on, range that were created upon request of a wonderful community member. And she was suffering from PTSD. So she's, a war veteran. And she knew that having the oils was helpful for her practice. They helped her ground, helped her come back to presence when she was in that elevated state. And she's just reached out and she's like, hey, Rach, do you have anything that would help with PTSD? And I was like, and I'd been through a similar experience with PTSD, not war, but I was like, yeah, I can create. Let me get creative. And so that's how anti-rage came into being, healing, acceptance and ease.
Mm.
And then, of course, calm the farm, which helps with anxiety, and awaken as well, which is like that antidote to that depressive state. So that immobilization state that you were referencing before. And I just created them as like a little pack for her to be able to use, knowing at what point each oil was going to help her. So
Mm.
obviously when she's about to like lose her shit, she would use anti-rage. When she was like finding it really hard to get out of bed in the morning, that would be a place for awaken. And then healing, acceptance is all about, coming to terms with your grief and accepting where your life is at in that moment. And that, I would say, would be in when you're in not necessarily in the thick of the grief, but when you're in a space that you're open to processing that grief.
Yeah.
Which I think is important as well, like the time and place of when you're using particular tools, like as you've mentioned before, knowing on your scale, but then also knowing like, maybe I'm in a really good place right now, let's keep practicing these skills. So then when I do get to an 8 or 10, it's not new to me. I'm not in an overwhelmed state trying to learn a new skill or trying to use a tool that I haven't practiced that much. Like, I'm not sure if you've ever felt overwhelmed or, in a state of ick, I'm just
Yep.
going to say.
Constantly.
And then someone's like, hey, here's this new tool, or like, here's this new thing that I need you to learn. You're like, no,
Yeah.
brain is shutting down. I cannot function right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of like if you start a new job, right? Like we've
Mm.
all started a new job at some point in time, whether it's a completely new job or just a new place that we're working. And when if they're throwing things at you, you've got a lot to take in. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, learn this extra thing on a Friday afternoon at 3 or like at 4. And you're like, uh
Catch these hands. I'm not doing that. Yeah.
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 So I think it's really crucial for using the oils, any tool anyway, but for using the essential oils like as a continual practice, and then knowing like where they slot in your 1 to 10,
Mm.
which it sounds like you're doing beautifully with your clients.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think that that's the thing, right? Like I sit in a little bit of a space of and this is being in the therapy space where I'm tending to do long-term, work with people, and my goal is always to not just stick a band-aid on something and to actually understand, okay, what is this thing and where is it coming from? And I sometimes use this analogy of like, if there was a weed that was overgrown in your yard, right? How do you deal with that?
Mm,
If it's chaotic and there's so much going on and you just need to manage it, that sometimes you just got to trim it back, right? It's not going to get rid of the weed, but it'll contain it. It'll make it doable to move through your yard and do what you've got to do, right? At some point, though, you've got to pull it at the root, right? But
mm,
sometimes you can't reach the root until it's managed, right? So for me, it's about, okay, I don't want to just necessarily throw tools at people because, and I sometimes say this to clients, I don't want to waste your time and money for something that you can Google, right?
yeah, yeah.
There are so many good resources out there now, but for me, it's much more of about, okay, if we understand what works for you and why, then you can Google and actually use that, it feels
Mm,
a bit more, you understand your process, right? It's not about the content of the tool, it's about how your brain works and why this thing works when it works, so that you then have the ability to get beneath and pull your weeds, right? To find the things that are causing these reactions, so that then not only are those particular issues maybe a bit better dealt with, but even then, your process, right? For you, okay, when I'm starting to feel this way, these are the parts of me that are maybe getting engaged or triggered, right?
mm,
I might have that problem solved, I
mm,
might not be new at my job anymore, right? But there is something about uncertainty that I might still struggle with, right? This is how I
mm,
feel when I feel uncertain, right? So I find that things like, um, that process of having something like the essential oils in your repertoire of coping it not only helps ease emotions, but it starts to help you to learn and become more in tune with yourself to know what is going on for me in the moment, right? If I'm leaning for calm the farm, right? I might not even clock in that I'm feeling anxious.
Yeah.
If I'm turning to it, I'm going, oh, okay. Is there an intuitive thing that's going on here that I haven't even consciously recognized yet? Right. So
Yeah.
it also informs, okay, what am I already doing in these moments? And what can that tell me about how I'm feeling in the moment?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when I work with my clients privately, I don't tell them like, oh, this is the kind of benefit behind this oil. I'll just take a selection that I think, based on what their presentation is or based on what their goals are, what I think they might need. And I'll just say like, just tune into what is uh, like capturing you at the moment. And
Mm,
sometimes and I've noticed it myself, like I created the bloody things. And
mm,
there are times where I'm like, oh, like I can't,
mm,
that one, no, that's not for me. But then other times I love it. And like for me, something like Awaken, sometimes I love Awaken. And that's when I'm like, oh, I need a lift. Like
mm,
I'm in a funk. I need a little bit of a boost, whatever it may be. And then other times I'm like, nah, like that's too much. I need to calm the
mm.
farm. Like that's
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
bringing it down. Um, yeah, yeah. So I'm so glad that you've mentioned that. And again, it also comes back to the start of our conversation, which
Mm,
is like bringing people back home, bringing
yes.
people back into their intuitive space,
Mm,
listening to body, connecting with mind,
mm,
connecting with spirit. Like it's coming home.
mm,
And I think that essential oils, like don't think, I know, I know in my being that they do that, and they allow us to connect and reconnect with ourselves, um, which can often be hard to do, and especially in those challenging times, like especially when you are having those big feelings, big emotions, or big life events. It's like, okay, hang on a second, just strip it back, as you were mentioning, like let's just
yeah.
take it all back. And the other thing I wanted to mention too, Britt, like, so we're talking a lot more about in that mental health space, but like even stripping it back further,
Mm,
it's like physical health, right? So when people say, oh, exercise,
mm,
if you don't like running,
mm.
I wouldn't tell you to run.
Yeah.
Like, or if your body can't run, like if you have an injured ankle or an injured knee, probably not the best thing for you. So I'm not going
Mm,
to encourage you to run. And it's the same with yoga. I acknowledge that it is not for everyone
mm.
at all. Can everyone benefit? Yes.
Yeah.
And there's so many varieties once you find a style that works for you, but not everyone's going to like that as a physical activity. And just like we've been talking about the essential oils and even just the different modalities of therapy,
Mm,
it's what works for that individual person, like that
absolutely.
individual body, that individual soul. And like what you're doing is like, it was super important, Britt. It's so much more than just like helping little Betsy who like is feeling a bit anxious about school. It's like, actually, no, you're teaching this person to connect with themselves, which is such a valuable and lost art form almost.
Yeah. Well, that's it, right?
So,
Like I'll very often tell people from the get-go, I'll be like, I'm not the expert, right? As in I don't know what it's like to be in your body. I don't know what it's
mm,
like to be you. You can tell me the ins and outs of every facet of your life, and I still won't know, right? For two reasons. One, I'm not in you, right? And I am in me, right? So if you and I listen to somebody telling us their entire life story, the way that you and I conceptualize it will still be different because you and I are different,
mm,
right? So
yeah.
I I'm not there to know everything about a person. I'm not there necessarily even to understand everything about a person. It's always a goal, for sure. But
Mm,
the reason I would want to understand is to help them to identify things about themselves, right? And like you were touching on with your oils, I think I've told you this before, I've had the same thing with clients where, if I feel like they could use a roll on to walk away with, I'll give them the range to pick one. And it's so interesting how often, maybe not every time, but very often, people will pick the oil that tends to correspond with whatever they're actually presenting with. And so it's very exciting. I always tell them, I'm like, oh my God, you know what you're looking for here.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, giving that permission to trust in your own attunement. And again, I think partly because of trauma, right? Like when we're talking about big emotions, I don't know about you, but when I'm anxious, I don't really want to be in my body. I'm like, no thanks. I'm done with emotions. It's not for me. I don't know her. I don't want anything to do with her. And so I so resonate with that. But I think the challenge is that I think sometimes we can tell ourselves that we can actually get out of our bodies. Like that is something that we can opt out of, and not that that's actually, again, a really important piece of information about something that matters to us. So how do we create space in a way that isn't so overwhelming, so that we can then make sense of it and do something about it?
Yeah.
Right? That's actually how you feel in control, because the emotions make us feel like we're going to be out of control, but actually they're giving us, that part of us is trying to communicate something to us. And if we don't give it the space to be heard, it will continue shouting at us.
Yeah. Well, emotions are just messages, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Oh, Britt, I love this conversation.
I love this. I love you. It's fantastic.
Talk all feelings. We're the feelings people.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah, just so resonate. But it makes me so happy to know that you're out there in the world, like doing the incredible work that you're doing anyway, but then adding, my products as a tool. Like that is huge. Like fills up my cup, my friend.
Yeah. Well, again,
Yeah.
I love it. I find it so useful, and clients love it. I think they've found it really valuable. I've gotten so much good feedback, and to me, it's, again, so impressive when something that you've created, and I know you've put blood, sweat, and tears into this stuff, um, that it is not just being appreciated, but I'm seeing the real time benefits for people in those moments, right? It's very cool.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Like I was only having that thought today, sometimes, life can be challenging.
Yeah.
Life can be hard. And sometimes it's easy to drift away from your purpose of why you started something. And like, as I mentioned earlier, my intention with everything that I do is just bringing people back into a space of alignment for themselves.
Mm.
And on tough days, like having like something like that I can anchor onto and be like, oh, this is helping someone, or there's someone out there that is taking a deeper breath and getting through a challenging time because of something that I've put into the world. And that, yeah, it touches me very deeply. And something I'm very grateful for. So I appreciate you sharing it. I appreciate you doing the thing and then sharing it with me as well, because yeah, I think I don't know, as a general, this is just my general viewpoint, we need to share more of the positive stories of anything. Like
100%.
like how quickly do we jump to like the negative of like, oh, how was something? Oh yeah, it was good, but it's like, no, let's stop with the but. Let's be celebrating the good things in our world. Like, hey,
Yeah.
how was therapy? It was great. I can now use my breath, or I can now use this oil, and this is what it smells like to me, and this is what it reminds me of. Or do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I
Well,
just
that's the
think,
thing,
yeah.
right? Like when I first started in this space, and in particular when we worked together in
Mm,
the youth oncology space, I think people hear that, right? Like, young people with cancer, that's devastating and depressing. And of course, right? Like there is absolute hardship in that, and I'm never going to negate that. It is brutal
mm,
out there. But I would also say, like, when people would say, like, "Oh, I don't know how you do it," I'm like, I get to witness resilience and incredible love and care for people
mm.
in the shittiest situations, right?
Yeah.
And so that feels like a good thing because again, the shit will always be shit if we're being transparent, right? Life
Yeah.
is really hard, and if we're lucky, really long.
Mm. Mm.
But it's hard for a long time when we're lucky.
Yeah.
And so getting those moments where we see people just doing things and choosing happiness and working hard on themselves to be able to claim something good, I don't think that there is a better story than that.
Yeah. Oh, I agree, Britt. Hope
Yeah.
everyone listening agrees. Otherwise, this is just a very soppy episode.
We could be soppy.
If anything, it's just for us. So
Yeah. Hopefully other people like it, but again though,
hopefully.
again, for your listeners though, I think that that says something about, and I know obviously don't want to speak for them, but I would hope that that would allow them to consider, and again, I know when we're going through hard stuff, it's not always like you want to be resilient, right? Like again, never
Mm,
negating challenges, but knowing that it's like, okay, if you have the opportunity to focus on the things that you're doing in the face of hardship rather than the
mm,
outcome, right?
mm,
That will feel a lot more accessible for you to regain some sense of purpose, some sense of joy, and some sense of contentedness in.
mm.
I think if nothing else, that's what I want for people, right? Is,
Yeah.
again, we can't necessarily solve all the problems in the world, even though we talk about like we will, right?
Like, oh well,
Yeah,
sometimes.
sometimes we will solve some really tough problems out there, as we always do, but we can't solve them all. And so in the
No.
absence of that, it's like, okay, if we can't solve all the problems, how do we reclaim something within the problem? Right?
Yes, yes, yeah. Absolutely. Actually, you've just sparked a memory for me. I need to post a blog post that I wrote. So I think we're like 2.5 months into like some pretty nasty sickness in our household with my little girl. And there was a period there, oh gosh, yeah, in the depths of like sleep deprivation. My daughter would only sleep on me. She was struggling with RSV, which is terrible and awful. But in those moments, like, and I was struggling too, but in those moments, I wrote down the tiny things, the minuscule things I was doing for my self-care. Because when, yeah, when you're in the thick of it and baby only wants you and they're attached to you, it's hard to feel like you have no time for yourself. And like, and there isn't really much time for yourself.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've been focusing on with Shine On Natural is breaking down self-care into those minuscule moments. And I mean, like, a lot of my clients are busy women between 24 to 45, and like the majority of them within that age range are mums. So I know anyone listening who's a mum is going to get it and be like, yep, get it. Like, don't,
Yeah.
like, the luxury of like a spa day or a massage or a long walk is few and far between for my community. And so I've been really trying to break it down. And I wrote a blog post on just a few of the things that I was doing, and it completely reframed my thinking from like, this is really hard, I can't fucking do this, I'm so fucking tired, like all of those things, to actually know what's in my practice. So like using my cleanser and exfoliate at night. So I've got a shower. I had a shower every night, which is, I mean, in itself, I had a hot shower. That's lovely by
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
It might
That's
have been
huge.
brief, but like it's still a thing, right? It's still looking at as a positive, as opposed to like, oh well, I've only got a shower at night, or it was only 3 minutes or whatever. But then just like being really mindful when I'm using those products of like, this is my moment, like not rushing it. And then just things like drinking water. Like
Yeah.
I've had, you would see me sipping on my giant bottle, which I absolutely love and highly recommend.
Yes.
But it's got like, it's the 2 litre, so at least I know I'm hitting it in a day. So every morning I'd fill it up and I'm like, oh, I'm getting my water, like, just basic human needs.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wrote a blog post about it. It's sitting in my drafts. much like the other 30 of them that I still need to publish.
Yep.
But yeah, you've just touched on something there for me, because I was like, well, that's an example of that, what you were just talking about, of like being in a challenging situation or a hardship, but then just focusing on what you do have and what skills or tools you can refer to and rely on what's in your self-care practice.
Yeah.
And like therapy is part of self-care.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing, right? I think I talk to a lot of people about, again, trust in self. And if I think about what trust means, at least to me, trust is about consistency. So being consistent with something and then having faith that you'll continue to be consistent, right? You know, so we talk a lot about trusting others. Like, you know, I trust that my partner will continue to dote on me because they've shown me this behavior. And so I have faith they'll continue to do that. On the flip side, you might trust that your nemesis at work in HR is going to continue to be a bit of a dick, right? Because they've consistently displayed certain behaviors. You might trust that they'll continue to do that, right? But that applies to ourselves too, in those moments of like, if you have put things in place, again, even if it is those micro moments, and of course you might want more than a 3-minute shower, right? But if you know that you can give yourself that, even and especially when it's hard, right? Especially when everything in you is telling you that you don't have this available to you, if you can somehow make some slice of that happen, that will develop a trust in you that you can handle things.
Yeah.
That you can do what you need to do for yourself and your self-care when everything around you is testing you in a way that suggests that you shouldn't or you can't. And that is so empowering.
Yeah, totally. It's taking control when in those situations, majority of the time, you don't feel like you have control.
Yeah.
But we all have some element of control over our own body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So totally empowering. I feel empowered. I felt empowered by it, and I shared it with my husband, and I was like, "Hey, this is what I've done." And I mean, I wrote a lot in those those nights, like, and that, like, you look at my entries at like 3 a.m. or 3:30, 4 a.m. Which is what I remember we were sending you a meme about, like, well, that's when my brain works the best. Like, what do you mean you need sleep?
Yeah.
My
Ridiculous.
brain is going to deep places right now.
Yes.
It's therapeutic as a practice in itself. So
Yeah, that's attunement, baby.
that's it. Well, I mean, the world was like, there was no distractions. But anyway, we digress. But yes, anyway. What was I going to say? Baby brains popped in now.
Yeah.
Where was I going with that, Britt? So we've talked a lot about how your clients use the products as well. But I'd love to know how you use the products, because I know you've used the products before. And in fact, I actually have a testimonial from, oh my goodness, years ago that I'm going to read and share, which again, so incredibly grateful for. And always being my supporter, my life partner.
I got you. We're yin and yang, as we always are and always will be.
That's it. That's it. So you had shared a testimonial about the Winter Warrior roll-on, and in fact, it wasn't a roll-on until you went on this trip.
Yes.
It was just the standard blend.
Yeah.
And then you were going on this trip. I was like, yeah, sure. So another example of when someone has requested something and I've been like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's just do that.
Yep.
That's just what we do now. Sure.
I really appreciate it. It was so useful.
So you actually had wrote, I'm just going to read it out. I'm not even going to pretend to paraphrase here. The Winter Warrior oil is so good. I used it on an international flight to keep the pesky germs away from all the gross humans. It helped me breathe easier when adjusting to the climate change at my destination, and I swear it helped keep the dreaded plane flu away. The roll-ons are super convenient to take with you and fit nicely in your purse or pocket. Definitely recommend.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, my friend.
Of course, it was all true. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think that this was also pre-COVID time.
It would have been, because it was well, actually it was 2019.
Yes, so
just. I mean, the world like went into disarray like March 2020. And I
Yes.
think this trip was like July 2019.
No, it was later than that. I went over Christmas. So, and I remember it was just starting.
Oh,
I had gone to Scandinavia and it was winter, and I
that's
had
right.
come through Japan on the way back. And Japan was just having, like, their outbreak started a month or two before ours. So I was like just on some cusps there, getting back into the country anyway. But I had my winter warrior, and let me tell you, I didn't get COVID when I came back into the country and didn't have it for several years after that. So
Could it be
I'm
the
not
new
saying it cures
COVID?
COVID, but I'm just saying,
We
I
are
didn't get
making
plain
some big
flu.
claims today, my friend.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying I didn't get COVID. So
Oh,
we'll do with that what we will.
yeah, actually, now I remember that time. Like, I remember we had a colleague who was pretty into it, with and rightfully so. And that was when the China was like deep into COVID, and you flew back via Japan. I remember all of this now. It's all coming flooding back to me. So for a bit
Yes.
of context, Britt and I used to work in the not-for-profit oncology sector, youth sector, for a few years together. We like, I mean, you had 1,000 roles, Britt,
I have.
in our time together.
It's the ADHD.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It actually is, isn't it?
It
Like,
is. It is. That's exactly what it is. We now know.
oh God. We now know. It's funny, actually, this is a side note, but like, you and like two other of my very close friends that you know quite well have also been diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, okay, three of my three closest friends.
Yep.
I'm
All
like,
I'm saying is birds of a feather.
I was like, hang on a second, girls, what's going on here? And I actually asked my mum, I was like, hey, A, B, and C, like, yeah, Britt, you're involved with that, all have it. Like, do you think so? Like, straight up, I was like, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, actually, yeah, okay, I've missed that. I've just let that flutter on by while I've been like, okay, friends, let's just try. I'm just herding cats here.
Again, the kindred spirits
Oh,
of us all come together in that way.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I haven't had testing. I don't think I'm ADHD. I think I'm just a very overwhelmed mum.
I mean, there's that too, right? Environmental
Absolutely.
factors. Yeah.
Mm,
But yes, we did work together in the
yes.
busy,
So
busy.
we've known each other for, what year is it now?
Must
24.
be 5 years. Just
5 years, Britt.
yeah,
Whoa, that went quick.
I know. It's probably near our anniversary, actually.
Oh, it would have been. What
Yeah.
month are we? July. Yeah, June.
Happy 5 years, babe.
Yeah, June. Happy 5-year friendship anniversary, my friend. Oh my gosh, that's just blown my mind.
No, that's
Okay,
crazy.
like life, can you just slow down a little bit?
Yeah, reckon.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, yes. So when we're talking about, for the audience listening, when we're talking about things and jumping between, we've got 5 years to reference.
Yeah, long
Referencing 5 years
timeline.
things happening here. Um, yes. Wow.
Mm.
How? What a moment. What a big realization, Britt.
Yeah.
Like some big claims and have some big realizations
Yeah,
today.
Rachel cure your COVID also.
Oh, shoot. Okay, so getting back to how you use
Mm.
the products in your, how they help you connect with your self-care rituals.
Yes. Yeah, so like in that example of using when I traveled and stuff. Obviously, yeah, it helped me feel like I could breathe easier, right? And even then, even if it was just like that boosting immune system sort of stuff, it brought me comfort, right? It brought me a sense of having something that was going to help relieve me from potential, you know, things that might have been holding me back, right? So there's there's the practical, again, physiological impacts of it. There was the emotional impact of again just having something in my corner there. Um, but yeah, even the other oils, like something like Calm the Farm, it's often like that's probably my go-to, and I usually
Mm.
keep that in my wallet. In fact, I have broken like 3 where they've fallen out of my wallet, and it's like every time it's like devastating.
I need
But
to look into a non-glass option purely for you,
just
Britt.
for me, yeah, it's me. I'm the problem. I'm the common denominator. But I'll use it often, actually, again, between sessions with clients, right? Like when because I'll have lots of heavy conversations, and so sometimes what I need to do is to just like, I'll see a human on their way. I've got 10 minutes in between. I'm taking my shoes off. I'm lying on the floor because for whatever reason, for me, that is really grounding. And I've just
Yeah,
got a little roller stick and I'm just whiffing it, just laying there, just anchoring in that moment, right? And again, it's really brief. I'll then go up and get a cup of tea, but I find that it just helps me to take a second so I don't feel like I'm doing this. Again, part of the ADHD,
yeah,
right? Is that you can feel like you're just like bam, 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 bam. And
yes,
in
yeah.
the busy world we live in, right? Again, you would know as a mom, right? Constantly something to be doing or something to be attending to.
Mm,
And so just having that moment to just stop and kind of reconcile things really briefly so that I can then
mm.
continue back in. So even just having it for things like that, I find really useful.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, it leans into that whole minuscule
Mm,
moments that we've talked about as well.
mm,
And I guess like on a broader scale of self-care,
mm.
um, what other things do you do for self-care? Like, yeah, what do you find? Are there any rituals that you find
Mm.
rejuvenating, or like what's your go-to?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think if I come back to that concept of attunement, Um, and if I'm going almost like a little bit meta in its concept, when I think about what helps me to feel in self-care is again just noticing where I'm at. I tend to be a little bit of a human of momentum. So, and when I say that, I mean if I've got lots of stuff going on, I can keep going. I'm like, and I'm probably more likely to burn myself out. But
Mm,
I find doing things actually a lot easier when I've got a lot of stuff on.
mm,
Whereas if things are kind of really calm and there isn't a lot happening, I'm much more likely to get stuck, right? And end up in the
mm,
couch rot type situation. And I might want to do something else, but I find it really hard to motivate. Um, so knowing that for myself, for me, what my self-care looks like is trying to maintain that middle ground of that flow of energies, right? So if I'm up here, right? What it looks like is actually just, again, taking a few moments, maybe taking a day off. So for me, more recently, I've been really intentional in structuring my work. So I have a day off every month. Like as in I have weekends and things, but I'm having an
mm.
intentional extra day off every month and a week off every 3 months. And even if I've got nothing
Oh,
planned, it's just making sure that I'm taking some steps back so that I'm preventing myself from burning out in future.
yeah, absolutely.
So that's
Yeah.
been golden for me recently. I actually just had one of the weeks off recently and I was like, and even then, in that week, I didn't actually need to rot on the couch, but I got my pantry cleaned, right?
Oh, dude.
Which that says something about where my mental health was at, right? In a good, right? Like I had the capacity to clean my pantry. We were good, right?
Yeah,
But it meant that that was something else that wasn't gonna hurt me in future, right? So
yeah.
things like that I find really useful. Whereas if I'm in the flat, kind of like, oh, I don't want to do anything, I just want to stay on the couch, scroll on my phone. I'm like, no, actually, you're gonna go to Muay Thai class,
Mm,
right? Even if you don't feel like it, that's actually what you need to do. And even if you're crap when you're there, that doesn't matter. You just need to be there right now because you
yeah.
need to pick up that momentum again. So that for me is what self-care looks like. Again, it like it at the start of the chat, it comes back to attunement.
Mm. No, that's awesome. Yeah, very very aligned, Britt.
Yes. Try to be. Try to be. Feels like a fight sometimes, but
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I think that's great. I think tuning in and then giving yourself the space or giving yourself what you need is super important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And using your annual leave, people. If you
Yes.
have annual leave, do something with it.
Yes. It is an entitlement. It is a right, not a privilege. It's your money. Spend
Mm,
it.
use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, too often I'm talking to people and they're burnt out and I'm like, when was the last time you had a break? Oh no, I'm just gonna bank all my annual leave. Like, dude, no,
Mm.
stop that. Bang,
Yeah,
bang.
yeah, that does not serve anybody. I mean, it
No.
might feel like it'll serve you later, but even then, it often doesn't, right? I've done that in past jobs with the intention of, oh, I'll take some time between ending this and starting this, and it's never actually happened that way. So,
Well, I was only having this conversation with my husband at some point in the last 18 months. I can't remember when. But we're talking about like the minimum amount of time you need to take off to actually feel relaxed. And it's 8 days.
yeah,
Like 8 days is like the perfect
yeah.
break
Mhm.
because you've had time to like decompress, rest, restore, like rest and digest, and then restore and pick up your energy again to return to whatever it is that you're returning to, which I think that's really cool to know that's only 8 days. Whereas like I remember years ago, and it could be like a solid 10, it could be a decade ago, when they were like people were pushing like the 3 week. You needed 3 weeks because the first 2 week, or this is when I was teaching, the first 2 weeks you're generally sick or run down. So you're generally sick, and then the like last week you've got to like pick yourself back up again. But again, if you think about that as a theory, if you only need a week, it's still that 8 day period.
Yep.
Like you're just giving yourself a buffer to be sick, which always happens when you're a teacher. Like that first week
Oh,
of any
100%.
holiday, you just cactus. So yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Britt. So do you have, like, for our listeners
Mhm.
seeking to enhance their self-care,
Mhm.
what's your go-to tip that they can easily incorporate into their lives should they choose to?
Great question. Yeah, again, I think a lot of it is about understanding those things about yourself and what it is that you need in different moments and in different environments. But if I'm coming way back to what we were talking about earlier with like that concept of polyvagal theory, is use your body, people. Like use your senses, right? And whatever it is for you that feels good in that way, right? Again, for some people it'll be oils, for some people it'll be yoga, for some people it'll be amusement park rides, for some people it'll be
Mm,
sex, right? Like
mm,
finding things that will help you to feel present in your body, right? Because the world is built for us to be in here. So find something that makes you feel comfortable to be in your body. And in particular, when you're feeling emotions, right, that you would prefer not to feel, something that allows you to be in your body at the same time as that feeling and not be overwhelmed by it.
mm,
So something, I might be able to think about some hard stuff when I'm having a massage, right?
mm,
Maybe it's not about massages, maybe it's about going to the gym, right? Again, whatever it is for you in those different moments, in those different contexts, that allows you to feel like it's going to ground you in your body. Because when you're in your body, you're in the present moment. You're not stressing about the things that have happened in the past. You're not worried about the things that are happening in the future. You're allowing yourself to just be for
mm,
5 seconds of your life, right?
mm.
I think that that is the most important thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Britt. And I mean, we've touched on so much today. And I mean, if I didn't know you as a friend, I would probably want you to be my therapist because you just have that holistic approach.
That would be a
Um,
real problem because you would also be my therapist and there'd be some conflicts of interest. It'd be a really complicated relationship.
A
We would have
word.
some problems.
So for our listeners, or anyone wanting to get involved in working with you, how do we connect with you? Where do we find you? How do I book in a session? All the things.
Yes. So I work, so I'm based in Brisbane for your readers that might not know. But I see people in person. I also have sessions over the phone and via telehealth. So I do see people around the country. I've got a client lives in Tassie, all around the shop. So, um, I work currently at a private practice called Little Window. So it's not just my own business. I work with a bunch of other therapists who I will also say are also excellent. So a big part of therapy is making sure that the person you speak to is the right fit for you.
Yeah.
So absolutely, please reach out to me if you feel like I'm going to be the right fit. But also, if you ever find that that's not quite right, there are a bunch of brilliant therapists I'd be happy to recommend too, if you have certain specialist needs as well. So yeah, the practice is called Little Window. So the website's just littlewindow.com.au. You can just reach out through there. We have a really beautiful admin team that will help, set you up, make sure that, you've got appointment times that are going to suit your unique life situation. I also do after hours and weekends to try and be as accessible as possible. So yeah, I'd reach out to them. You can phone. There's a inquiry submissions that you can send through to. If you do want to book in with me, just note my name in there, which is Brittany. And we have our profiles on the website too. So I can also flick you those details, Rach, so people can read that if they'd like to.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll put it into the show notes, and so then people can reference it
Great.
while they're listening
Mm-hmm.
with the links. And I wonder what else we can put in the show notes. I feel like
Little Window also has an Instagram account.
I love their Instagram actually.
Yeah, I think I'll have to double check this. I think it's little.window.psychology, but I could be wrong about that. Let me double check.
Yeah, we'll add that into the show notes as well. But they've always got a fun. I love their memes. I mean, I love memes in general, but their memes are very relatable.
Yeah.
Often I'm like, oh my gosh, and they've got to send it to you, and I'm like, it's your business.
Yeah, often I've sent it to them.
Yeah, it's like, oh, she knows this one.
I do. Sometimes I'll send them once and I'll be like, okay, that's maybe a little too unhinged for the socials account. So they're the ones I send to you, Rachel. So
send me all the unhinged ones.
Absolutely.
Oh,
but yeah, so that's probably the best way to access me. I don't have my own public socials or anything, but that's also part of my self-care, right?
Yes, yeah.
I don't need to be on the internet as much as I am.
Yeah, I totally feel you there, my friend. Yeah, I totally, we'll save that conversation for another day, especially because this is being shared on social media.
Hello, everybody.
It's like YouTube is it's a social media, but it's a search engine as well.
Yeah.
It's an interesting space, YouTube.
It is.
Breaking all the barriers.
Yeah.
Crossing barriers. Anyway. Well, anyway, Britt, before we just start talking shit and boring our beautiful community, we'll wrap it up. But yeah, just want to say a huge thank you for joining today and sharing. I thought that was a really informative episode. I really appreciate that you went into the Polyvagal Theory in a way that, it makes sense for me. Hopefully it makes sense for the community and for people listening who don't have that as a reference point. So thank you for breaking that down. And then, for sharing in how we're using essential oils as a skill, as a tool, as something added into people's self-care toolkit, which just the work you're doing just sounds absolutely phenomenal. And your people are so lucky to have you. And I've seen you work and I know how incredible you are. So I can definitely, this is coming from the heart and I know it's true. So it's not just waffle.
No.
But stop it.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And it is a privilege to get to work with the people I work with and to get to talk to you in this context and see, the work that you do and get the opportunity to reach out to your audience and, the people that are listening. I think it's, again, we go through lots in life. And so I hope that there is some use. I'm also happy to answer any questions if people do come your way with any too.
Yeah, sure thing. And if anyone has any questions, you can either write comment on the podcast episode or shoot me a message either via Shine On Natural, probably via Shine On Natural, which is just at Shine On Natural on Instagram. Or I do have Shine On, but I'm going to be stepping away from Shine On for a little bit. Shine On AU, that is, not Shine On Natural. That'll keep powering. So just flick us any questions you have, and then I'll pass them on to Britt, and Britt can comment and go from there.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, lovely listeners, we are going to sign out from chatting with you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Feel free to comment below, give us a follow on any of the accounts, and also comment on what you'd like to hear about next time. And if you have any further questions for Britt, maybe we could have another podcast episode, Britt. Maybe Talking Shit with Britt the segment is coming.
I'm down. Hell yeah.
But like I have aspirations to like do this kind of on my own as well, like, and then like have that as a segment, but then I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't trust my brain right now. Yeah, listening to this episode and then like just, I mean, it could be comical, if
I mean, again,
anything.
if nothing else, I think we would have a laugh with it.
I know. I just listen back and be like, I said, what now? Now
I
circulating the interwebs. All right. Well, lovely community. I'll be back next month. I have the divine Andrew, and I'm very excited to share his journey with you as incredible human, but how do I describe Andrew? I mean, he started I met him when he was a yoga teacher, but now he does psychic channeling. He does human design. He is a nude men's yoga teacher and tantric sex facilitator. And just is a beautiful, beautiful human. So stay tuned for that episode. She'll be dropping in August. And also, can I give credit to my darling daughter who hasn't interrupted? I've been hearing her crying in the background, and I'm like, oh no. But she's given us space. So thank you, darling, when you listen to this in 30 years.
love you, Violet. You're the real MVP.
That's it. All right, community, we are signing off. Farewell, take care, and keep shining.